I admit I am a skeptic. I'm even often cynical. So it won't come as any surprise to you that I believe our world is generally populated, and maybe I should just say in America. However, it doesn't stop here. I mean, it's not just America, but in America, we are a group of people as a whole who make decisions, choose direction. We Most of what we do is generated out of emotion, out of feelings, and the highest value is to feel good. I I slip into this. I can't just say it's all of them and not me. No, no, I do it too. It's part of our brokenness. Our limited and inadequate and ineffective self-interest always promotes the idea that I just need to feel good. And so why am I telling you this? I mean, you probably already figured that out a long time ago, right? I'm telling you because it's not just a problem that we have. It's not just this newly discovered or recently begun thing. This has been going on for maybe forever. Uh, John writes about. I think he writes about it in First John chapter 3, where in verse 18, where I mean, he's just talked about how this. What if you want to know what real love is? Here it is. Real love is a picture. It's Jesus who laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. And then he goes on in verse 18 and says, Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. Now, honestly, my confession is I would usually much prefer to talk about my compassion rather than to express it. One of the words that John uses for that I think is interchangeable with compassion is pity. I would much rather talk about or write about or insinuate my pity than to actually do something about it that would cost me time, energy, money, effort, and so forth. John understood that. And as he's talking about what real love looks like, that it is self-sacrificing, it is unselfish. He just says, feeling good about it isn't the point. Talking well about it, that's not the point either. The point is, do it. Actions done in truth. That's an interesting concept. Let us love not just with words and speech, but in action and in truth. All right. You can do certain things in action and they not be done in truth. I mean, that's easy to understand, really, because we're talking on a motive level here. You see the same pity that should be done if we're doing it as a response to the unselfish love expressed by Jesus when he laid down his life, leaving us an example to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. Well, if we are doing so, if our action is to demonstrate that, to reflect that same kind of love, that's in truth. But there are a lot of times when we will do things for the show of it, right? We'll do things because, well, it makes us feel good. I mean, and here's the other part, makes us look good. John is absolutely not interested in the show. He's interested in the truth. Now, a quick look in another direction here because, just because we can. When John wrote his biography of Jesus' life in chapter 1, he connects the two things we're talking about here, these actionable things, this love in action in truth. He connects those two things when he says Jesus came full of grace and truth. That's in John chapter 1. To me, this is one of the most profound theological truths in all of the Bible. Because if you separate grace from truth, or truth from grace, you've crippled the gospel. So if it's only about truth and truth alone, you'll become a crusader for what you believe is right. Is that evil? Is that wrong? Well, no, I don't think so. I think that's how slavery ended. I think there are tons of wonderful, godly things because people have stood up for, sacrificed for the truth. But if you pull grace out of that equation, then grace becomes a weapon of punishment. Grace becomes a bat that we swing at any and everything, even other truths. If it's not my pet truth, it doesn't fit, right? Grace and truth have to be connected. And here's an interesting thing. John doesn't indicate by his language that Jesus was full of about half grace and half truth. So that made him, no. He was full of grace and full of truth. How can grace and truth... Well, I don't... This is why I think it's such deep theological truth. I can't exactly very well explain how can one be full of truth and full of grace. It seems to me you can only be full of one or the other. But Jesus demonstrates it's possible to be full of both grace and truth. Here in his letter, John writes, we reflect that when we don't just talk about love, but when we do actions and behaviors that demonstrate love in truth. You can't, I don't think it's possible to love someone, to truly love someone in action without grace. I mean, that's the energy, that's the fuel, in some ways it's the engine. I run out of metaphors. To behave toward another person in love is an act of grace. And when you connect it with the motive of truth, you get the best bang for the buck. That's how it works. The world is changed, and you know this, not just by rhetoric, but by rhetoric and action, by words, by choices, by behaviors done in truth, in sincerity. I am a political pessimist. I used to be a political activist. This is when I was young, late teen years and early 20s. Let's change we can change the world if we're, get in the, be active. I got over that because it didn't work. You know what that's like, where you vote and you vote and you vote, and I'm not making any difference here. So then I tried to be apolitical, meaning just no political views. I couldn't sustain that. Now what I am is a political pessimist. And what that basically means is I do not believe politics is going to solve our problems. It can't. There is no way the only way that politics will solve any of our problems is when those involved in politics become public servants, not politicians. A politician, and if you are one, you got to think about this for yourself, okay? Just an observation. Those who are career politicians have to constantly be testing themselves to discover, am I only a politician or am I truly a public servant? And here's where the line in my mind goes between those two things. A politician will, my observation is it hardly takes even one term for a politician to begin structuring their strategies and their behaviors and their words and actions so that they will support a second term. This is, another word for this is self-interest. And the needs of the folks that this politician represents become second to their self-serving self-interest. That is, I need to retain my power. So obviously, if that's all you knew about me, you'd know I'm a political pessimist. I do believe that God can use even politicians with very broken motivations. But if he does that, it's against their will. And that's not new. The Bible's full of politicians, kings and rulers and politicians who had their hearts turned almost against their will, who under their reign, under their rule, good things from God happened. Not because they had this altruistic motivation, but because somehow God caused them to permit things that, well, just doesn't make sense when you look at the rest of their rule and reign. Well, okay, so, man, I guess I'm just in a political mood today. But John's words apply to politics, don't they? Let us not love with words or speech. Holy cow. 80% of what a politician does is words and speech. I mean, that's my observation, right? Okay, pessimistically. But with actions and in truth. That's the only way a political system works. And by the way, although I'm not a constitutional scholar, I have studied and done some research that makes me believe, I'm fully convinced, that the founding fathers that was their desire, was their goal, and they modeled this, that those who were in this position of political leadership were to be part-time citizen representatives. They were not to be career, lifelong politicians. They want, the only way this system of a democratic republic would work is if the interest of the represented always outweighs the interest of the one doing the representing. And that comes, in my mind, under the category of don't love with words and speech only, but with actions and in truth. Now let's come down on the runway for the last minute. What about you and me? We're not politicians, probably. I don't make rules. But you know what? As many rocks as I've just thrown at the glass house of politicians, I got to be aware of the fact that I am no less responsible to love in action and in truth, not just in words and speech. So I have to look into my own life and evaluate. You have to look into your life and evaluate. You don't get into heaven by mounting up all of these checked boxes for the times that you've loved in action and in truth. It's not about checking the boxes so you get into heaven. It's about you've been redeemed. Now act like the redeemed. Love in action and in truth. Believe it or not, I got more to say about the application of that, and we're going to come back to it next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.